Now, you know that next week I'm going to come back and he's going to just give me another 10 Hail Marys and another 10 Our Fathers and... I mean, you know how I feel about that shit. Those things, they don't mean anything to me. They're just words. Now, that may be okay for the others, but it just doesn't work for me. I mean, if I do something wrong, I just want to pay for it my way. So I do my own penance for my own sins. What do you say, huh?
Mean Streets is a crime film released by Warner Bros. On October 14th, 1973. The film was co-written between Martin and Martin Scorsese, who also directed the film. The film stars Harvey Keitel, Robert De Niro, David Proval, Amy Robinson, and Richard Romanus. For many, Martin Scorsese is a name that will ring more than a few bells when it comes to famous movie directors with a long list of successes under their belt. While many will recognize Taxi Driver as the breakout film that put Scorsese on the map, Mean Streets, a movie based on his experiences growing up in New York's Little Italy, was the title where Scorsese really got his hands wet as a director. It also marked the breakout of Robert De Niro as an actor, in a first-time collaboration with Scorsese that created a working relationship that continues to this day. So being a film that cemented the reputations of two Hollywood legends, you gotta wonder, what did this film do to earn its standout status? How does it capture the essence of the city it works so hard to portray? In this review, we hit the streets of Little Italy to find out how this story of fictional men trying to find their way helped real people find theirs. Just as a warning to everyone here, there will be major spoilers ahead. If you wish to see this movie for yourself without knowing anything beforehand, please click off the video now. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The story follows a young man named Charlie, a devoutly religious debt collector who is troubled by his conscience and torn between a responsibility to maintain the reputation of his uncle and employer Giovanni, a leading figure of the mafia in New York, while trying to do right by the people he cares about. This is especially prevalent with Charlie's cousin Johnny Boy, a reckless and impulsive slacker who owes many debts to many men. Beyond that, Charlie, despite being charismatic and well-liked, struggles to keep peace between various people owing each other money, especially in the case of Johnny Boy. Between a meeting in a billiards bar leading to a fight, and a mob shooting taking place at the bar owned by Charlie's friend Tony, most of Charlie's life is fraught by the doings of irredeemable men and dealings that go nowhere, save for one where he inherits ownership of a restaurant that cannot pay their debts to his uncle. Charlie is romantically involved with Johnny's cousin Teresa, though the relationship is complicated by their need to keep it a secret, as Charlie's uncle believes Charlie's simply watching over her. Though Teresa loves Charlie and wants them to be together, Charlie is not ready to commit to a proper relationship, though he claims that things will be easier once he assumes ownership of the restaurant. Before Charlie can claim ownership, though, he is approached by Michael, a friend and a client, who speaks to him about concerns with Johnny. Michael claims that Johnny can no longer be reached at his place, and that he no longer shows up to work, raising concerns about whether he will be able to pay his massive debt that he owes to Michael. Charlie confronts Johnny about his carelessness, telling him he needs to show up to the meeting with Michael arranged at Tony's bar, for fear of what will happen to him if he doesn't. Though Johnny agrees to meet Michael, he fails to show up on time, leaving Charlie worried about him. When Johnny shows up at Charlie's apartment, a fight breaks out between the two. As Charlie berates Johnny for acting stupidly, he comes to learn Johnny has no money, save for the $10 in his pocket. After giving him $20, Charlie takes Johnny to Tony's place. Michael arrives, already angry that Johnny left him to wait for over an hour, and asks him what he has. Much to the dismay of both Michael and Charlie, Johnny gives him only $10, having spent Charlie's 20 on drinks at the bar. At this point, Johnny launches into a tirade, mocking and belittling Michael as someone he takes advantage of freely and with pleasure. Michael attacks Johnny, but Johnny pulls a gun out of his pocket, forcing Michael to make a hasty exit. After disarming Johnny and screaming at him for his stupidity, Charlie asks Tony if he can borrow his car. Charlie takes Johnny and later Teresa in the car and drives down to Brooklyn in an effort to hide Johnny for a few days. While the trio are trying to make their way through Brooklyn, they get sideswiped by a car that is shown to be driven by Michael. Michael has a man in the back seat pull a gun and fire on the trio as they try to get away. Johnny gets shot in the neck, and Charlie gets hit in the arm, causing him to lose control and crash the car into a fire hydrant before coming to a stop. In the final moments of the movie, Michael escapes the scene of the crime as Charlie and Johnny stumble out of the car. Johnny stumbles into a dark alleyway alone, while Charlie and Teresa are recovered by paramedics. The movie comes to a symphonic close, leaving the futures of everyone we have met uncertain. So depending on who you are, you're either gonna love this movie or hate it. If you go into this movie wanting a clear-cut A to B story that gets to the point and keeps you up to speed along the way, then you'll be rolling your eyes so far back in your head that you'll see the memory of this movie disappear off your brain in real time. But if you're okay with a movie that ambles around and focuses on building more grounded settings and interaction, then this movie might be one for you to keep an eye on. The best way to describe the progression of Mean Street's story is a day in the life. Though at face value, moments such as Tony recanting Charlie's experience with a lying priest over a game of pool, Tony and Michael ripping off some kids trying to buy fireworks, or the conversations between Charlie and Johnny following the shooting at Tony's bar carry little meaning beyond being a thing that happens. It actually serves as a decently impactful exploration of the characters and the headspaces they're trapped in. Though you aren't told in as many words that Tony is an impulsive hustler with an aversion to obstacles to his needs, you get the impression of it by seeing him throw his patrons out his bar's back door after the shooting, or revealing that he's illegally keeping lion cubs as pets in his attic. Though Michael isn't described as a good-natured but desperate man who has come to rely on the spoils of his criminal life, you can figure it out through his meek interruption of Charlie's meeting with his uncle, while still not hesitating to threaten Johnny's life days later. In Johnny's case, we are told that he is a reckless and careless slacker, and with him hiding behind cars to avoid people he owes money to and literally trying to shoot the Empire State Building in his free time, it doesn't take much to see that point of view with clarity. At the center of it all, though, is Charlie. Though on the surface you see someone amiable and jovial who is one of the guys, there's more going on when you peek behind closed doors. Each interaction we see shows that Charlie's priorities are being pulled in a million different directions. Between maintaining his uncle's reputation, being approachable to his clientele, being a good friend and confidant to the people he cares about, all while battling with his own conscience and trying to find a way to make a better, more righteous path for himself, we see Charlie go out of his way to strike a balance and keep the peace until it becomes impossible for him to do so. Though his inclination to act righteously and morally is admirable, it ends up being his undoing, as he chooses to let Johnny drag him into a mess that nearly costs him his life. In terms of what this movie is meant to be, it is first and foremost a character movie, and in that department, it's safe to say that the complicated dynamics between the friends/rivals struggling through life's grievances are quite memorable. The actors deliver performances that make this story come to life. Harvey Keitel perfectly captures the range of emotions exhibited by a young man going through the motions of trying to evaluate where his life is going and what his priorities should be. He brings to life the struggle that many people face when it comes to deciding when and where to look after yourself, and when and where to look after those important to you, making the otherwise fragmented story feel a bit closer to the heart for those watching. Robert De Niro is also a standout in his breakout performance, with his boisterous, fast-talking, arrogant attitude, on top of his unpredictable and at times dangerous antics, providing a solid foil for Charlie's plans to create a better future for himself. Despite all of this though, he's also able to channel a childlike giddiness and vulnerability that makes us understand the relationship he has with his cousin, and why Charlie continues to look out for someone who, by all accounts, exists only as a pain in his ass. David Proval, Amy Robinson, and Richard Romanus also bring forward performances that ground the conflicts of the story and round out the day-to-day, showing us what the highs and lows look like for the folks of Little Italy. The movie does some interesting work building themes of righteousness versus depravity through the movie's technical work. An interesting thing you might notice is how the movie uses lighting and music to differentiate its moments of moral piety and moral corruption. In scenes where Charlie is acting decently, so to speak, and is involved in events that are set to propel him towards a better future, it is taking place somewhere with lots of light, above ground, and in an open place, working to display the idea that he is part of something with the potential to broaden his horizons. On the opposite end of the scale, you see that when he's caught up in something he shouldn't be a part of, it happens below ground or in darkness, out of sight of anyone but those who are looking, in a claustrophobic, dimly lit, and dingy setting, personifying the idea he's become trapped in a cycle that's getting harder and harder to escape from. The music factors into this as well, with moments of relative goodness being cued with operatic classical music, while the moments of deviance are highlighted by contemporary hits that are usually loud, fast-paced, and work to get your blood flowing. While there are a few exceptions to this, the pattern that emerges with how and where these elements are used becomes hard to ignore once you pick up on it. Couple all this with the tracking shots, slow pans, and close-ups that make up the camera work, and the idea of Charlie's struggle with right versus wrong really comes to life for those who wish to witness it. Or maybe this is a bloated over-analysis on my part, and I'm making myself out to look like a self-important dick. But hey, regardless of that, the camera work, lighting, settings, and music used are all well done whether you care about themes or not. On the less positive and preachy side of things, you have the editing. While the transitions within fast-paced scenes are nicely put together and have good flow, the transitions in slower-paced scenes tend to be rather jerky and abrupt. Scenes where this happens include Johnny and Charlie talking during the night, only for it to become day during the same conversation, Charlie waiting for the owner of a restaurant, only for said owner to teleport into the frame with a hand on Charlie's back, and Charlie and Teresa's walk on the beach teleporting them hundreds of feet during the same conversation. There is an abundance of scenes that are cut too rapidly, making it feel like the movie got a little too far ahead of itself. If those scenes don't raise your eyebrows, though, this little flash in the pan of creative genius is sure to do the trick. If you think that was random without context, let me tell you, it doesn't make much sense with it. And for all the thematic imagery this movie is supposedly throwing your way, I must admit I still haven't figured out what the hell this is supposed to mean. May Martin forgive my ignorance. Another thing that's sure to generate some hard feelings is the dialogue. Being set against the backdrop of the streets of New York, the characters speak in an abrupt, casual, and trashy way. While this fits the atmosphere the movie's going for, it's worth bringing up because the movie has more than a few slurs, be they racial, homophobic, or whatever else you can think of, pop up out of the blue. It's definitely not as boisterous and overdone as The Wolf of Wall Street, and it's not as harsh and pointed as Taxi Driver, but the offensive words are still very much present. So if that's something that bothers you, proceed with caution. Or not at all. Or go ahead and watch out of spite. Look, I'm not here to tell you what to do or what to think, I'm just here to tell you what you're getting into. Lastly, what some might call this movie's strength may also be defined as its weakness, and that is in the story, or rather the lack of one. While the movie is very adept at exploring characters and the kind of lives they live, it doesn't put much effort into its pacing, leading to it telling a story that many may find rather dull. While the issue of Johnny's debt to Michael is sort of the guiding light as far as what the movie is building to, the tension isn't really present until the day of the meeting, and the stakes of Johnny not paying and the impact it'll have on Charlie are not properly established until the moment comes. Many people will be left wondering, especially following the cliffhanger ending where the characters are essentially pushed off stage, what the point of the movie even was. And if you're looking at it from a storytelling perspective, the short answer is there really isn't one. The movie doubles down on exploring people and taking its time showing us a bite of reality, instead of giving us a kinetic and punchy plot designed to grab you by the hair and drag you along for the ride. So be prepared to be disappointed by what the point of the story you see is, because it's safe to say that as far as this movie is concerned, the story was never the point of why you watched it. The final rating for this basement bar extravaganza is 7.5 out of 10. Though the way this movie tells its story is unconventional and occasionally frustrating, it builds up a very believable and grounded setting courtesy of memorable performances and themes of good and evil that are bolstered by good technical work and head-bopping music. If you're interested in exploring the lesser-known movies that defined cinema, or just happen to be a Scorsese superfan, then Mean Streets is a title that will definitely be worth the price of admission. That's all we've got for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you feel it's worth the while, consider liking, sharing, or subscribing, and if there's a movie you want to see reviewed, leave your suggestions down in the comments. Also, if you're feeling especially generous, consider following me on Twitter @IUntrained for updates and other nonsense. There's plenty more to come, so if you care enough to return for it, then I'll see you when I see you.